Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Pokemon SoulSilver. In the last part, we caught a few more of them legendary birds, and then started off our little side quest at the Ruins of Alph. However, we've basically done everything we can do in the Ruins of Alph by just entering the Ruins of Alph normally. There are two more rooms we still have to do the puzzles in, and you can only access them from Union Cave. In particular, I remember way earlier on the LP, we came down to this floor and grabbed like an item or something. But now that we have Surf, we can head north in this room towards where the other two exits of Union Cave are. Most of the rest of the floors of Union Cave we still haven't explored because we are exploring the rest of it this part as well. Don't have anything super new Pokemon-wise, either in the water or otherwise. It's usually the same as like the Sandshrews, the Vulpixes, the Geodudes, the Golbats. It's the usual cave fare. Same with the usual water fare on any of the white parts that have water. Now, what's so interesting about the direction I'm heading first, by the way, we're going to be jump cutting back towards where that hiker is in several minutes, is that it actually leads us to the only patch of grass in the entirety of the Ruins of Alph. And what's interesting about that is that the grass in the Ruins of Alph is really the only place in the game, barring I think the Safari Zone for one of them, you can find two particular Pokemon. You can find Natus here, so if you want a Xatu, this is the place to go. But this is also the only set of grass in the game you can find the Pokemon Smeargle. Smeargle's interesting. It's a pure normal type, so weak to fighting, immune to Ghost. Own Tempo or Technician for its abilities, so it can't be confused or moves below a certain power or boosted. The main gimmick of it is it has the signature move Sketch, which copies moves from the target Pokemon. And it'll only learn Sketch by leveling up, and it learns it fairly regularly at that. I want to say like every 10 levels. This theoretically means that Smeargle can be the most powerful Pokemon in the game for Pokemon catching, because you can teach it moves that either do damage during certain status ailments, guarantee certain status ailments, or otherwise just help you in battle. With that said, Smeargle itself doesn't really have anything super stand out about it stat-wise. It's kind of fast, but that's about it. Alright, so I read that pretty quickly. In order to open this door, you need to have Ho-Oh in your party, because Ho-Oh is currently in my party. And I also would like to note, I misspoke last part, you don't get any evolution items here. It's entirely held items for very specific Pokemon types. Like a Charcoal boosts the power of Fire-type moves when held in battle. I'll actually be putting that on Blaze towards the very end of the project. Mostly because at that point I won't have much more use for an amulet coin. For now, let's do this place's puzzle. This Pokemon with feathers of 7 colors flies throughout the sky, according to legend. We gotta make Ho-Oh, and this is probably the most complicated of the puzzles, if only because, from memory, it also has the most missing pieces. Very few of these puzzles are what I would call hard, but I at least appreciate there being any sort of actual puzzle in a dungeon in this game. Because, like I mentioned last time, that's part of what makes, like, Pokemon Ranger dungeons so interesting to me, is that they actually have puzzles. Whereas a lot of the time, mainline Pokemon dungeons really don't. These puzzles were also in the original game, but I think they worked a little differently. I think they each had slightly different solutions as well. For now, let's fall down into our next lore room. Oh, this one's a long message. We humans need to walk with them. We leave here for the sake of them. In the original game, that said we humans must learn to walk in harmony with them. We depart for their sakes. Doing that particular room in the Ruins of Alph unlocks Unown's W, X, Y, and Z for catching. So we only got one room left to get to. Big problem is we have to head all the way back into the Union Cave for this, and you need strength to do this as well. So you need some HMs in order to finish this. So you need to have at least gotten through to the end of the Olivine plotline, I think. Oh no, actually no, just finishing Chuck now that I think about it. Union Cave as a kid really blew me away with its scale, because genuinely it's such an early game dungeon, but there's so much more to it that you just don't get to explore. It's very rare that early game Pokemon dungeons have anything really that much more to them, barring like the occasional hidden item. And if anything, that's one thing I can give Mount Coronet in Gen 4, it's big. And you go through a lot of it, and there's so much more than you'd think. But I don't like it in that case because that's too big. And thus it is time for our final puzzle room. Starting off, what you need in order to actively clear this particular door is water. Now you might wonder, well, what's water in this case? It could be surf, it could be whirlpool, it could be waterfall. You need to use a water stone in front of it. I believe I actively had to go buy another one of those from the Pokeathlon. Unless I just had one from doing something else in the game already, which I very well could have at this point. Doing all of this is required, by the way, in order to finish off the side quest here, including falling into the lore rooms, which is why I'm just jump cutting to them for better flow. And I haven't shown it off yet, but that unknown report we got last part does actively fill out. The more unknown you catch, and the more of these little sub-events you see. For now, let's just go take care of the final puzzle. A 10-legged Pokemon that swims on the bottom of the sea and eats plankton. This one's much easier to guess just by looking at it rather than reading that because you're making Ammonite. What makes this particular puzzle a little weird is because of how samey looking the shell is, some of the parts look like they can go in like 5 different places, and it's kind of annoying. With that said, it's still a very small jigsaw puzzle. For some reason, I have distinct memories of doing jigsaw puzzles at doctor's offices, and there was one particular one I did, I might even own it, of like Power Rangers not Lightspeed Rescue, it was like Wild Force. But in particular, I think it was like based off an old Japanese movie poster from one of the Super Sentai movies, because it had whatever the name of the Jack of all trades-y character was from the second Super Sentai season, Jack Q, I think it was. They possess power to sense with mind and reject outside. In the original game, that said they possess great insight and refuse the outside world. In some ways, the original writing's a lot more clear, but this is much more in line with anything mysterious. Doing that particular puzzle unlocks unknowns K, L, M, N, O, P, and Q. And I should also note at this point that if you check the radio within many of the rooms here, this mysterious transition plays. Kinda creepy, but this actively does increase the chances of you running into unknown you haven't caught yet. So if you want to do that, make sure you do that, just to make things go by a little faster for you. At this point, let's take a look with the guy in the main archaeologist's house and see what we're going on here. How we're doing here, rather. My staff here at the Ruins Research Center is excellent, and the research makes good progress with absolutely no effort on my part. If you have any questions, feel free to talk to my staff. You have to hear this. This is a big discovery. It was you who solved the stone panel puzzle that allowed Unown to appear. Those tablets are key to waking the unknown. Still, why would anyone make such a key? The more you talk to this guy, the more pages in the unknown report you get. There are, in total, 9 separate notes pages for you to get, and you just really need to keep talking to him. And in that particular jump cut, I have now caught all 26 of the main unknown. So let's get some appropriate mood music and start reading, why don't we? Open up that unknown report. 26 currently known. Anger, bear, chase, direct, engage, find, give, help, increase, join, keep, laugh, make, nuzzle, observe, perform, quicken, reassure, search, tell, undo, vanish, want, yield, zoom. There are still 2 more yet to find. You might wonder where they are. This is now available to be investigated after you catch all 26. When did this appear? I wonder what these symbols mean. Hey, you, let's go back to the research center. The symbols in the stone panel were like this. Our friends look up and heartily congratulate us. I wonder what it means. We need to examine the ruins once again. Alright, but after that, that golden panel actively unlocks the last 2 unknown for catching. Afterwards, we'll take a good look through the unknown report just to show you what you kind of missed or can see from getting it. The last 2 only spawn here in this first room, and they are the question mark and exclamation point unknown. And just to save some time, I am going to jump out catching them after I show this one here. And wabam! Let's go see what that guy has to say now that we've caught all 28. Am I jump cutting here a lot? Yes, but it was necessary for time's sake. You have to hear this. We're learning more and more about the symbols on the floor. It seems that Unown were living at the ruins of a human clan. It's thought that this clan made up the Pokemon statues underground. The Unown were easily scared and couldn't go outside. When more and more people started to appear around the ruins, the clan that wished to live in harmony with the Unown eventually left. Thanks to our research and your help, we've unraveled so much about their mystery. We have so many things we don't know left, of course. Archaeology never ends. Something I really appreciate in retrospect about the Ruins of Alph in particular and Crystal, but especially Gen 4, it really started to heighten the amount of lore Pokemon had. But now let's take a look at the finished Unown report. Found a strange puzzle in the ruins. Solved it and suddenly a hole opened up in the ground and I dropped into the room below. Should have known that ancient ruins would have surprising tricks like that. There was a stone statue where I fell. The place might have been a reception hall. Then suddenly the Unown appeared. That puzzle was like a key somehow. It woke the Unown from their sleep. These ruins have become difficult. If you turn on the radio in the ruins, you can receive a mysterious radio wave. It's proof that the Unown communicate with each other using radio waves. There are as many Unown as there are letters in the alphabet. Right now, we're confirming the existence of 26 kinds of Unown. Do you think you can find all 26? It seems that individually they don't have much sense, but when the various Unown are arranged in order, they begin to make sense. In nature, they seem to be scattered around randomly, but the truth is they're arranged in a very specific order. In this report, the scattered Unown were sorted and put into order by the research center staff. That makes the Unown much easier to understand. Scratched on the floor of the ruins are Unown letters. Finding the room feels like a huge discovery. The researchers were very excited and said they were going to go check it out. There aren't just 26 kinds of Unown, 2 more have been discovered. But that begs the question of where those other 2 kinds are hiding. The characters found scratched on the floor in the small room were transcribed here in this report. Our friends look up and heartily congratulate us. We don't know what this could possibly mean yet. The researchers are saying they'll need to re-examine the ruins again, but... But what? But what? In the past, it seems that Unown lived with relatives of humans in these ruins. In the lower levels of these ruins is a Pokemon statue. We've come to understand that it was these relatives who made that statue. The Unown are very timid creatures, so they don't go outside the ruins. Even if a bunch of people gathered near the ruins, it is said that the ones who wish for Unown and humans to again coexist have all left. And here's all 28. That took me about 45-ish minutes from memory. It can get a little annoying when you get down to the wire when there's only like 2 left, but it's a cool little side quest, if ultimately unimportant. I at least appreciate the attempt at lore, because I know a lot of people are big lore heads, and it really took Gen 4 to expand a lot of stuff like that. Like, Sinnoh's main theme is honestly lore more so than anything else. And Gen 4 through 5 are really the peak for that with the series. Because Gen 5 has a lot of lore for Unova and the world in general. Then Gen 6 onwards have their own lores, but that's when we start throwing in the multiverse stuff, which just makes Pokemon a little less interesting, honestly. Like, to an extent, you could just say, okay, maybe only the remakes are in the alternate dimension kind of thing, but sometimes they very much imply that's not the case, and I'm not a fan, not a fan. With that said, now it's time for us to explore the lower floors of Union Cave, and starting off, we got a new Pokemon with this particular Pokemaniac. This is Marowak. This evolves from Cubone at level 28. Pure ground type, so it is weak against water, grass, and ice, but it's immune to electric. Marowak, for being just a second stage evolution, has really good physical defense, and some good special defense as well. It just can't do much super well. It's got an okay attack stat overall, and it has an okay learn set as well, including the very unique Bone Meringue move, which hits the target twice and can crit decently often. Also, the speed-up theme for this particular part is Critical Hit, I believe is the name of the song. It's the main battle theme from the original Wild Arms, either way. Although fans of a very particular YouTube channel for over a decade at this point probably hear and immediately think of them instead. With that said, time for another new Pokemon. This is Kangaskhan. Pure normal type, so it's weak to fighting, immune to ghosts. But notably, if you get the ability Scrappy on this thing, it's not immune to doing damage to ghosts, because you can just use normal type moves on them with that. Kangaskhan's a surprisingly good Pokemon, because it's got a good HP stat, decently fast, decent physical attack stat as well. It just is that close to having a specialty that it really doesn't. It took until it got that Mega Evolution that was absurdly busted for other reasons, to be really, really good. They're hard to find, but I can recommend them. They have a good enough learn set thanks to TMs and especially TRs down the line. So they're worth having around, I'd say. Now, this lowest floor of Union Cave is interesting, in that you can come here more or less as soon as you get Surf. And they really expect that level-wise, because most of the trainers down here are in their 20s, I think? And you can find trainers that have all 3 of the Kanto starters, for instance, as well as all 4 of the Kanto EVs, including Eevee itself. Sometimes it's clear they intend you to do things much earlier in the game than what I'm doing here. But in other ways, it's... Without having a hard lock of you need to do this before this point, otherwise you miss out on it, or you are required to do it for plot, dungeons like this just never are on my mindset for main game, and I'm guessing a lot of other people are like that for Pokemon at least, so it just kind of suffers. Again, the level curve is arguably, if not the worst part about any version of Johto and Kanto. Kanto more so in the Gen 2 sense, but even then, like I mentioned back when, in my Fire Red LP, Kanto itself structure leads to similar problems. Now, the main reason I'm doing Union Cave right now as well is because when I was recording this, it happened to be a Friday. And there is a very particular reason you'd want to come to Union Cave on a Friday, and I mentioned this much earlier on in the project, sort of. And that is at the very southern edge of this particular room, which is the lowest part of Union Cave. On Fridays exclusively, a Pokemon is waiting there for you that could be a really good addition to your team overall. Albeit, you need a water type to reach it, and it being a water type itself means you might already have a good water type on your team, making it a little redundant barring Pokedex completion. On Fridays, in this lowest body of water, lies a Lapras for you to catch. I'm not showing the full process of catching this, I'm more or less just going to jump cut to the actual catching, because I've already talked about Lapras in depth. I love this thing, it's a good water type. Are there better ones? Technically, yes, but it's a pretty good one to use overall, especially considering they give you one for free in most versions of Kanto, when that's the main region at least. The biggest problem is, A, Vaporeon's my favorite water type anyway, so I already have things that will do most of what Lapras can do. But, again, because you need a water type to come down here, it can make your team layout up to that point kind of redundant. But at the same time, Lapras would be very good to have around, especially from memory with its move set from leveling up, for Claire in particular. Because if I recall, Lapras learned some Ice-type moves decently by leveling up. So, yeah, there might be your Claire killer. And that's the end of Union Cave. Lapras, the transport Pokemon, it ferries people across the sea on its back. It may sing an enchanting cry if it's in a good mood. And since we're done here in Union Cave, we're actually gonna use this Fade to Black coming up as a convenient jump cut. We're now back in Route 42, just east of Ecruteak, because now that we have more or less every HM in the game between Rock Climb and Waterfall, particularly, we can now fully explore Mount Mortar, as we couldn't do that beforehand. Not that there's a lot super important waiting for you here, barring a Pokemon you can only get here. The main thing you're going to grab here otherwise is items, which, hey, those are useful. You are going to need Waterfall and Rock Climb to get everything out of this area, though. So currently, I forget who I swapped out. I want to say I might not have Blaze in my team at the moment for some reason, in order to have Graham for Waterfall. I am very glad starting in Gen 5 they really started to reduce the importance of HMs because it makes team setup so much easier to do because I don't need to worry about having my transport Pokemon, essentially. I don't mind how they did them in Gen 5 where they were mostly just for optional side items at the least, but Gen 6 beyond basically going, yeah, they're not really a thing for plot progression at least, I was very happy. The ride Pokemon, especially in Gen 7, were much more interesting a step forward in that regard. If they, albeit a bit more limiting, because they could only be used in certain areas. And I'm hoping that Gen 9 brings that back a little bit, admittedly. And from what we've seen about being able to ride at least technically 3 distinct Pokemon, counting the 2 title legendaries, maybe we'll see what happens. Still got about 2 months before that game comes out. Also, you might notice it as we go through this footage. The encounter rate here is really high. And I think that's more so a problem with Pokemon in general, particularly Gen 4. The encounter rates have always felt kind of high in comparison until they started doing the thing where you only get truly random battles in certain environment tiles, and most of the Pokemon are just on the map, like in Gen 8. And I guess that technically started in Let's Go, didn't it? I don't really miss full random battles at all, because I like being able to at least somewhat control being able to run away like that. To this day, I still think the most interesting use of random encounters is probably still mainline Artanelico on the PS2, and I guess PS3, but we don't like to talk about Koga, where every area has its own encounter gauge, that the more random encounters you run into, the more it depletes. And when it's empty, by the game's definition, you've more or less gotten to a level where you're not going to need much experience moving forward, so they just stop giving you random battles until you leave the area and come back in. Which makes exploring in that game very easy to do, and makes level grinding in that game a little bit annoying, but it's not super bad. Not that you really need to grind it, at least Artanelico 1, barring maybe for the final boss. That game's pretty easy. Artanelico 2, maybe, if you're not understanding that battle system correctly, because I know I didn't on my first playthrough. I didn't realize you could use the D-pad for things in that until about the second to last area. So I was playing it badly. I thought the different attacks were entirely random. Ooh, Aerial Ace. That's a pretty good TM to find in here. That's the main reason you probably want to come in here besides the Pokemon you can only get in here. As, frankly, you get some good moves, just period. Including one that you need rock climb to get. In fact, that might be what we end the part on. Just call it a hunch. Yeah, let me check the Pokemon you can even catch in here from memory. Where's the Gen 4 set? Rattata line, Zubat line, Machop line, Geodude line, Marill line, the usual water suspects. Yeah, that's really about it, huh? That's not too surprising, I guess. The main reason I'm doing all this now instead of when I first got the ability to do it is mostly just to help take out the battles quicker. And the main reason I'm doing all this now is also to help gain levels for what's at the top of Mount Silver. We are still a good distance away from going up there. Like, let me check the list I have here on my other laptop real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. There are 19 events currently that we're going through that ends in what's at the top of Mount Silver. 17, not counting Mount Silver Part 2 and that thing at the top of the mountain. And we've currently done... This is the 9th thing, so we're about halfway to me doing that. Thankfully, the longest events I have saved for after that. So, we're gonna have a lot happening. And thankfully, not a lot of that's gonna need a lot of editing, technically. The next event we do is probably gonna take the most out of what's left. Well, actually, no, there's like 2 things left that are real big. Because a lot of the things are just me focusing on very specific events and talking about them. Sometimes trying to be a completionist in RPGs for recording is easy, like me memorizing all of Final Fantasy VII. Sometimes I have to remember things that are so way back in my memory and have to research how to do them again that it's arguably not worth the effort, but I need to show off all the games as best as I can when I do them nowadays. The real weird thing is, by the time this comes out, by and large, barring working on the other LP I'm also concurrently working on this with, potentially being finished by then, hopefully, I'm more or less out of video backlog, so like that update video I made about a year ago at this point, is probably about to come true where videos are going to start being on a when they're done basis more so than doing a backlog. And here we are at the very lowest point of Mount Mortar, but this guy. Hey, I'm the Karate King. I train alone here in the cave. You, battle with me. Hwag! This is the leader of the Saffron Fighting Dojo that we saw way back when. He's training here in Mount Mortar for some reason, and he's going to throw out the same Pokemon he threw out way back in your original Kanto journeys in Gen 1, Gen 3's remake of Gen 1, Gen 7's version of Gen 1. Am I missing any Gen 1 revisits? I don't think I am. He's going to throw out a Hitmonlee, then a Hitmonchan. We've talked about these Pokemon. At this point, if you do this now, you're going to be fine on levels. I am kind of surprised in retrospect, though, that they didn't at least also give him a Hitmontop to show that he's kind of grown in his training. But I guess in the case you were doing this as soon as you could, they didn't want you to maybe face a Hitmontop prior to Bruno, I guess. Because they definitely try in some cases to hide Pokemon until the end of the game behind the championship. Either because they're too powerful and they realize it, or they want you to do more after you finish the game. Because having post-games nowadays in RPGs is more or less the expected standard? Either way, that's the fight. It's 2 Pokemon you've probably fought plenty of at this time, including if you grinded the Elite Four in Lance for money. So you probably know what to do. But now for the interesting part. I'm crushed. My training is still not enough, but a loss is a loss, I admit it. As proof you've defeated me, I'll give you a rare fighting-type Pokemon. This is Tyrogue, and Crystal, you still get this, but it's an egg. Tyrogue isn't a very good fighting type on its own. It's weak to flying and psychic, but all of its stats, universally, are 35. What makes Tyrogue interesting is that it can evolve into Hitmonlee, Hitmonchan, or Hitmontop. The problem is making it do that is annoying. It needs to hit level 20 first, all the same. But if the Tyrogue's attack is higher than its defense, it'll become a Hitmonlee. If its defense is higher than its attack, it becomes Hitmonchan. If those 2 stats are equal, it becomes Hitmontop. Getting Hitmonlee and Shan isn't too bad, especially if you just use the breeding over at the daycare to just get multiple multiple Tyrogues. Getting Hitmontop is the hard part, especially if you get a nature that just goes against you entirely. And from memory, I don't think they've really done many evolutions entirely dependent on stats since. If they have, I'm completely forgetting about them. They usually like to have at least one kind of out there evolution per game. Because like in the original games, you could argue it was the trait evolutions overall. In this, it's the Tyrogue evolutions. Gen 3's weird one is, it's probably overall, Shedinja. Gen 4 gets some weird ones like Mantine, and you need like a Remoraid in your party while leveling up a Mantike, I think. Gen 5, what's the weird one for Gen 5? Oh, you know what? The weird one for Gen 5 is Excelgor and Escavalier. Gen 6 is Inkay. I can't remember any of the weird ones from Gen 7, but there's definitely at least one. And then Gen 8 starts bringing in, like, the Runa Regises and all that. I'm wondering what the weird one for Gen 9's gonna be. Like, do you think it's gonna be something like, this Pokemon can only evolve while you're next to another player? Or something like that? Because of the whole, if I'm recalling what we've heard correctly about Gen 9, there's still going to be multiple players on the overworld, but there's only going to be 4 at a time. It's like the same 4, as long as you're connected to the internet. So you can always consistently just be playing with your friends in some way. I'm really looking forward to that game. More than I have for Pokemon in a while, and I've played every single main game at least since I got back into the franchise with Gen 4, admittedly in a weird way. If memory serves, this is one of the largest caves in the series, by the way. Like this and the Whirl Islands wouldn't get topped, I want to say, until Mount Coronet, period. And to this day, I think Mount Coronet might still be the largest technical individual cave system, because I think every single part of that links back into itself in some way, even if you need like later game HMs to do so. I say I think because It's been a while. Genuinely, when I get to doing any kind of practice for the main Gen 4 LP, that'll probably be the first time I've played that game through since early high school, maybe, or later than that. It's been a while. Like I mentioned it before, I don't really like to revisit Pokemon too much. If I do revisit one of the more recent ones, technically, particularly Gen 5. But Pokemon is overall something I really need to be in a mood for. So the fact that I streamed Emerald through the first third or so of this LP. I'm LPing this right now, and I'm going to probably stream through Scarlet when that releases. Means a lot, as well as I also played through all of Arceus this year, even though I never went back to get all those Pokemon and do that final battle. I really should, because that final battle looks fun. But with this door here, we're finally going to be done with Mount Mortar, because the final reward of it lies out here if you have Rock Climb. Which I think to get to this door you need Rock Climb anyway, so Down here, I believe we just get a good enough TM. Let's see. Oh no, it's a Dubious Disc. You need that to evolve Porygon 2 into Porygon Z. That is much more useful than I thought it was going to be. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 34, I'm not going to mess around. Let's just actually go catch those roaming legendaries. They've been going around for a bit. See you guys then.